The document is 3 sentences long. I've read it so many times over the past 6 months that the words no longer look like words to me. They look like shapes now. Shapes I made. Shapes I signed my name beneath on a gray Tuesday morning in Geneva, while the rain came down outside in long straight lines, and someone in the hallway was warming old coffee in a microwave, filling the corridor with a smell that had nothing to do with history and everything to do with it. Shapes that will sit in the Galactic Accord's permanent archive for as long as there is a Galactic Accord. I fold the document once, tuck it into the inside pocket of my jacket right against my chest, step up to the podium. 214 delegations. That is what the Accord's Grand Council chamber holds, 214 species representing close to 4,000 inhabited worlds, arranged in rising concentric rings that reach toward a ceiling so high it has developed its own weather. There is a small cloud up there right now, pale and slow, drifting past the upper observation tier. Nobody in this chamber watches it anymore. I still do, every time I stand at this podium. Old habit, Missouri women watch the weather. The session moderator announces my name. His own name is a sound that requires secondary vocal structures I was not born with, so in the privacy of my thoughts I call him Cord. He has no idea. This makes me feel marginally better about the overall state of interspecies diplomacy. He reads my filing designation into the record. Standing business, notification filing. Standing business. I unfold the document. I read it the way I practiced in my quarters at 500 this morning, standing in front of the small mirror above the sink. Not quickly, not with weight. The way you read something that does not need decoration because the words already do what they need to do on their own. Earth hereby notifies the Galactic Accord that the restraint protocols of 2187, entered into voluntarily upon humanity's admission to the Accord, will expire in 30 standard cycles. This notice is a courtesy. It is not a request. 3 sentences. I fold the document. I sit down. The Velhari delegate, 3rd ring, left quadrant, does not look up from the reading material he has been studying since the session opened 2 hours before I stood at that podium. The Then Collective's 4-bodied representative continues updating trade projection figures on a neural pad, 4 hands moving in the comfortable synchrony of total indifference. Behind me, in the Human Observer Gallery, 32 Earth staffers maintain the particular discipline of people trying very hard not to react to something that just changed everything. The chamber moves to the next item in 4 minutes. I count them. 4 minutes. That is what it takes for the assembled representatives of 214 civilizations to hear that humanity is removing the leash it built and placed on itself. And decide the more pressing matter is a resource tariff dispute between 2 species who have been arguing about the same 3 asteroids since before my grandmother was born. 4 minutes. Bless their hearts. My aide appears at my elbow the moment the moderator moves on. Cal Norton is 24 years old, Nairobi-born, first off-world posting, and he has the particular quality of someone who has read extensively about history without yet understanding what it feels like from the inside. He carries a notebook everywhere. The notebook is very full. He leans close and keeps his voice low. "That's it," he says. "That's it." They moved on. I lift my water glass. Earth water, shipped to me personally in sealed containers at my standing request, a preference that 3 successive administrative directors have noted in my file with increasing levels of diplomatic sensitivity. They always move on, Cal, right up until the moment they don't. He writes that down. The session continues for another 2 hours. I watch the Velhari delegate drift into a light sleep at the 40-minute mark, his head tilting in the comfortable asymmetry that his species finds perfectly restful, and that humans always read as structural collapse. I watch the Then Collective's representative complete its trade projections, and begin a recreational logic puzzle on the same pad without missing a transition. I watch the Oran Federation's delegate, Sieve, who has not moved once since I sat back down. The Oran watch. That is their known quality in this chamber. Every species has a quality that defines how they occupy a room, and the Oran occupy rooms the way astronomers occupy observatories. Still, patient and recording everything. Sieve is watching me right now. I look back for exactly one measured moment. Then I look at the little cloud near the ceiling. What the Accord has never fully understood about the restraint protocols, and what we chose not to correct because the misunderstanding was useful, is that they were not military caps. When Earth signed them in 2187, every Accord observer assumed we were filing the standard new member goodwill package. Weapons ceilings, territorial commitment agreements, the sort of document a young species signs to demonstrate it can behave at the table without being asked twice. The kind of paperwork that gets acknowledged and archived and never opened again. They were not any of those things. Dr. Ada Marsh, who designed the biological and cognitive architecture of the protocols in the year before we signed them, described them in a classified internal brief as a voluntary reduction of expressed human cognitive and physiological capacity to a range compatible with non-threatening coexistence in a multi-species environment. In plain language, we agreed to run at a lower setting. Not our floor, not anywhere close to what the ceiling actually was. A carefully negotiated, scientifically managed output level that let us take our seat in this chamber without making our neighbors understand too quickly what had just sat down beside them. We turned our own dial down. We kept it down for 200 years. In that time, we filed paperwork. We appealed and sanctioned and negotiated through every formal channel available to us. We built nothing above the Accord's tier 4 classification. We expanded no territory beyond our agreed corridor. We started no wars. Every other species currently represented in this chamber started at least one. I think about that fact sometimes. Late at night, when the station's hum drops to the frequency that finds the space behind my eyes and stays there. The session ends. Cal falls into step behind me in the exit corridor. He walks half a step behind, which reads as subordinate on this station, and which I need to address before it becomes a permanent habit. That conversation belongs on the shuttle, not in a corridor where the translation systems log everything. "Ma'am," he says, catching up, "could Earth have just let the protocols expire quietly, without filing, without telling anyone?" I stop. He nearly walks into my back. I turn around. My first posting supervisor, Leon, once described this particular movement of mine as the thing Voss does before the room changes temperature. "Cal." "Ma'am." The notice was the point. He is quiet. 0600, get some sleep. He goes. I watch him move down the corridor. This 24-year-old who was born after the protocols were signed, who has never once in his entire life experienced what full human output actually feels like from the inside, what it is to be a species running at its own natural pace with nothing held back. Neither have I. That part stays inside my chest, in the exact place where the folded document used to be. I take the long route back to my quarters, past the observation deck, past the archive annex, past the small memorial plaque near the North Junction, which was installed in plain English without a translation panel beside it because that absence was not an accident. It was a choice. I stop at the plaque. I always stop. 847 names. I recited them on the shuttle this morning, the way I do every time I travel to this station. I will recite them again tonight, the way I do every night I sleep in this building. The clock is running now. 30 cycles. The Accord will understand what that means. Or it will not. Either way, the document is filed. 36 hours after the filing, the Velhari hegemony publishes a cultural analysis brief. Standard procedure. Anytime a minor species does something statistically unusual, the Velhari Cultural Assessment Division produces a brief. They are thorough people, the Velhari, organized in the way of a civilization that has been cataloging other civilizations for approximately 900 years and has developed a deep, unshakable confidence in its own conclusions. The brief arrives in my message queue at 700, flagged routine, by the station's sorting algorithm. I read it standing at my kitchen counter in yesterday's shirt, holding my first coffee. The title is Endearing Primate Aggression Ritual, a Non-Threat Assessment. I read it once, make a second coffee, read it again. The document is sincere, polished, and complete. It compares humanity's notice to the territorial display behaviors of several pre-sapient species the Velhari have documented across their centuries of observation, notes that the species in question has consistently failed to escalate beyond formal protest throughout its 2-century Accord membership, and concludes with a recommendation for increased diplomatic engagement and reassurance outreach. Reassurance outreach. For us. I set down the coffee, pick it up, set it down again. Cal arrives at 7:30 for pre-briefing preparation and finds me standing at the window, watching the station's exterior maintenance crew work on a hull section, which is not something I would normally stand and watch, but the alternative is staring at the brief again, so here we are. The Velhari brief came through, he guesses. Read it. He reads it on his pad. He is quiet long enough that I know he has read it properly. Then he says, very carefully, they think we are posturing. They do. Do they know what the protocols actually? No. He processes this. Should we correct their understanding? I look at him. He is holding his pad with both hands, the way he does when he is working out whether to say something he is not fully certain about yet. I have learned to wait in these moments. It is always worth waiting. No, make coffee. We have a full session this morning. The Thin Collective does not acknowledge the notice at all. I learned this from a source I have maintained for 11 years inside their administrative filing division. A thin analyst named Paul who owes me a favor from an incident near Proxima that falls outside the scope of this account. Paul confirms that the notice has been filed under a category heading I can only roughly translate as irrelevant xenosocial noise, and that no internal discussion has been generated in any department. None. Not one word. I sit with that information for a while. The Oran Federation's response comes from Steve personally, not a formal diplomatic note, not a filing through standard channels. A private message, written in the careful formal English of someone who learned the language from old texts and has never quite lost the weight of them. It says, we have studied your historical archive more carefully than most. We have seen patterns here that concern us deeply. We ask only this. What happened? What happened? I draft a response. I write the full truth of it, all 847 reasons laid out in order, the full account from the beginning. I read it back. Delete it. Write a different version, shorter and warmer, the kind of answer that keeps a door open without walking through it before the time is right. I write, thank you for asking. Some conversations belong in person. I will come to you before the cycle ends. I send it. I never send the first version. I never do. The open public forum on the Accord's communications network generates a thread within hours of the notice going live. The title is Earth Having a Moment? By the time Cal flags it for my attention, the response count is past 4,000. The most voted comment reads, humans have been about to snap for literally 2 centuries. It is their cultural identity. They perform threat and then organize relief efforts for whoever they threatened. Classic apex predator guilt complex. Nothing to see here. The second most voted comment says, I genuinely love humans. They are the only species in the Accord who will file a formal protest against an injustice and send food aid while waiting for a reply. The third says they signed the protocols themselves. Nobody forced them. They were not asked. They just did it. That tells you everything you need to know. They are terrified of what they are. I read that third comment 3 times. I take a picture of the screen and save it to a private folder. I am not entirely sure why. I just do. Cal is eating lunch at his workstation when I come back into the main office. He always eats at his workstation. I have raised this. He nods in agreement each time and does not change. The mediation session has been pushed up. The Pelari draw situation collapsed again. Of course it did. Also, he puts down his fork. Ma'am, is the notice real? I stop walking. I mean, he looks at his hands for a moment. He is 24 years old and he is sitting in a chair 9 light years from home, and he is asking me if the floor he is standing on is still solid beneath him. Is it actually going to happen, or was it a diplomatic signal, a position? I sit down across from him. I do not do this often. He notices that I am doing it and he sits up slightly. I filed it, didn't I? I say. Yes, ma'am. The protocols expire in 28 cycles. He is quiet for a long moment. What happens after that? I cannot tell you exactly. He blinks. You cannot tell me exactly. Nobody can. That is the honest answer. We have the historical record. We know what we were before 2187, but every human alive today was born after the protocols were signed. Every human serving anywhere in any capacity has spent their entire life with the dial turned down. I pause. Including me. I have never known anything different either. He stares at me. We filed the notice because we needed to choose this consciously, not react to something that forced our hand. Choose it deliberately, with 30 cycles of warning to the galaxy and to ourselves. He opens his notebook. I leave him to it. At 2100, after the full session and 2 back-to-back mediation calls, and a dinner with the Pelari ambassador that produced nothing of value, I am back in my quarters. I work through my messages, file the day's reports, handle the small accumulated weight of routine correspondence. Then I open a classified folder that requires 3 separate authentication steps to access. The kind of access that leaves a logged record, which means someone will see that I opened it tonight. I open it anyway. The folder is titled, What We Agreed to Forget. Not classified because of secrets in the usual sense. Classified because of weight. Because the people who archived its contents decided, with great care, that it should not be casually browsed. That opening it should require intention. I scroll through the index. I close the folder after 6 minutes. I sit in the dark and I recite 847 names, the way I always do. Then I sleep. 20 cycles into the countdown, 3 Accord species jointly petition Earth to resign the restraint protocols. I am not surprised. I told Leon, back in Geneva 3 months before filing the notice, that something like this would happen at roughly this point in the timeline. He told me I was being cynical. I told him I was being accurate. We agreed to disagree, which is how Leon and I have handled every professional disagreement across 14 years of working together, and which functions well for both of us. The petition is beautifully written, polished to a degree that tells me several drafts preceded the final version. It calls humanity a cherished and valued partner, whose restraint has been an inspiration to newer Accord members navigating the challenges of collaborative interstellar coexistence. An inspiration. The Accord schedules an emergency session within 48 hours. Nobody wants to call it an emergency session, so it is officially titled Special Review, Earth Accord Membership Status and Protocol Framework. But the room is different from a standard session. The seating arrangement is different. The security presence is different. The air is different in the way air is different when everyone in the room is carrying something they have not yet said out loud. I sit at the central podium. This is a different position from filing out of a delegation seat. This is the position the Accord places you in when it wants answers. I have sat here before. I know what it asks of you. Accord opens the session, reads the petition into the record, invites Earth's delegation to respond. I put both hands flat on the table. An inspiration, I say. I let the words occupy the silence for a moment. Let me tell you about the inspiration. Nobody in the room moves. In the 43rd year of Earth's Accord membership, a terraforming crew was working a designated site in what was then unclaimed expansion space, 3 sectors east of our agreed corridor. 41 people. They had been on site for 8 months. Their youngest member was 19 years old, a geology student on a field rotation. Her name was Meg Cole. Silence. That same year, a Croth Dominion expansion fleet moved through the same region. The Croth were not signatories of any boundary agreement covering that sector. The crew had filed a formal presence notice with the Accord's territorial registry. The filing was in complete order. Every procedure had been followed correctly. I pause. The Croth fleet classified the site as a minor obstacle. The closest translation of their operational term is inconvenience. The fleet moved through in approximately 4 hours. The Oran delegate, Steve, has not blinked. Earth filed a formal protest the following day. We submitted documented evidence, crew manifests, communication records. We requested Accord intervention under the Mutual Protection Framework. We received acknowledgement of receipt within 3 standard cycles. I take a breath. In the year that followed, Earth filed 29 additional formal protests related to Croth expansion movements. We requested emergency mediation. We requested a sanctions review. We requested an independent territorial assessment commission. We were informed that the Mutual Protection Framework did not apply to sites carrying the substrategic classification. Substrategic. I let that word take its time filling the room. Substrategic is a designation in Accord defense doctrine. What it means, in the language beneath the language, is not worth defending. Insufficient military presence. Insufficient economic value. The 41 people on that terraforming site did not meet the threshold required to activate the protective mechanisms that Earth was explicitly told existed when we joined this body. I look at the delegate from the Pelari Federacy. He helped design the substrategic framework in 2204. He does not look at his notes. Earth continued filing. For 3 years we filed. We protested and sanctioned and appealed and petitioned and documented. We attended every mediation session. We waded through every committee review. We followed every procedure this Accord offered us. We did the quiet thing for 1,000 days. The chamber is completely still. In that time, 3 additional installations were classified substrategic and lost. A medical research station, 8 personnel. A school transport vessel in transit, 32 children and 14 adults. A supply installation serving 4 human settlement clusters, 11 crew and 7 contractors. My hands are still flat on the table. 847 names, I say. That is the final total. Scientists, engineers, teachers, medics, maintenance workers, and a 19-year-old geology student who had been on site for 8 months. All of them documented, all of them filed, all of them substrategic. I look at Steve. You asked what happened, I say. That is what happened. 847 things happened. And on the day the last report was filed and the last committee postponed its review, Earth stopped filing. Nobody asks what happened after Earth stopped filing. The Croth Dominion has not been a functioning entity for 162 years. The Accord's official record classifies the relevant period as a time of significant internal restructuring following territorial overextension. The phrasing was agreed upon diplomatically, by parties who preferred the comfort of careful language over the discomfort of precise language. I have never corrected the phrasing. I do not correct it now. What I say instead is this. The restraint protocols were written by Earth scientists in 2186, signed by Earth's government in 2187, submitted to the Accord as a voluntary goodwill gesture before our first membership session convened. Nobody requested them. Nobody asked us to write them or sign them. We did it because we sat down together and had an honest conversation about what we were, and we decided that if we were going to live among you, we were going to be the kind of thing that could actually live among you. I look at the petition on the table. I understand why you filed this. I do not question the sincerity of it, but I need you to understand something. The protocols are not the reason we have been peaceful for 200 years. The protocols are what we built to hold the space while we proved to ourselves that we could choose peace consistently under pressure when it cost us something. They are the frame, not the picture. Steve speaks for the first time in the session. His voice is low and precise. And have you proved it? The question lands heavier than he perhaps intended. Or perhaps exactly as he intended. The Orin are precise people. We filed a notice, I say. We gave 30 cycles of warning to a galaxy that could have been given none. We are sitting in this chamber answering questions while the clock runs. I look around the room. That is what restraint looks like from the inside, not the absence of capability, the daily decision to hold it. I stand. The petition is noted. Earth's response is no. The protocols expire as filed. We will remain in full compliance with every accord agreement to which we are signatories. We will continue to engage through diplomatic channels. We will continue to file the appropriate paperwork. I pause. We will also, for the first time in 2 centuries, stop running on a lower setting. I leave the petition on the table. I walk out. Cal is waiting in the corridor holding 2 cups of coffee. He does not say anything. He just extends one toward me. I take it. We walk. After a while he says, "How did it go?" "The way things go," I say, "when the truth finally has enough room to stand up properly." He writes that down. I do not tell him that Steve's question is sitting in the center of my chest, like something I swallowed and cannot locate the edges of. Have you proved it? 20 cycles remaining. I am asleep when the protocols expire. I want that on the formal record. I want it documented and archived and accessible to any party who requests it. On the night of the 30th cycle, Ambassador Commander Dara Voss, Earth's senior diplomatic representative to the Galactic Accord, was in her quarters in her assigned bed, asleep. She was not at a command console. She was not coordinating operations from a secure facility. She was asleep. This matters. I want the record to show it because the truth of it is important in a way I am still working out how to articulate fully. We gave 30 cycles of warning precisely, so that no one would need to be awake at a console when the moment arrived. Cal is the one who wakes me. He does not knock. He opens the door and turns on the hallway light and stands in the frame without speaking, which is how I know it is already done. Cal speaks when things are still in motion. He goes quiet when they are finished. How fast? I ask. He tells me the number. I sit with it for 4 seconds. The number is not the kind you react to immediately. It is the kind you put down carefully, the way you put down something that might not survive being held too tightly, and then pick back up once you have figured out the right grip. Make a lot of coffee, I say. We are going to have visitors. Arvin arrives first. He is the most senior Velhari diplomat I have worked with in 18 years of this posting, a man whose institutional training is so deep it runs in his posture and his breathing. He comes to my office at 400 station time without an appointment, which the Velhari do not do under any circumstances I have previously observed. He sits down without being invited to sit, which they also do not do. The agricultural conversion, he says. The 3 installations. Our technical teams cannot identify the engineering methodology required to produce what was done. No, I agree. Completed in under 6 hours. Yes. He is still for a moment. He has the look of a man who has opened a door he was entirely certain led to a supply closet and found the ocean on the other side. Ambassador Commander, what tier has Earth actually been operating at? I pour him coffee out of reflex, even though the Velhari use a different compound for their morning ritual, and he will not drink it, because hospitality is a reflex that does not turn off at 400 in this body. Let me explain what happened, I say, and then your questions will mostly answer themselves. What happened in the hours immediately following the expiration of the protocols is this. 3 strategic staging installations belonging to the successor entities of the Kroth Dominion, which had been maintained in the expansion corridor since the Dominion's collapse, were converted, not removed, not destroyed, converted at the component level into functional agricultural support infrastructure, serving the population clusters that Kroth expansion movements had displaced across the preceding 2 centuries. The engineering precision required was beyond what the Accord's technical classification bodies had established as achievable under Tier 4 constraints. Under Tier 4 constraints, the work was theoretical, possible in simulation, not in practice. Under Tier 4 constraints, the Velhari technical analyst who files the assessment at 700 writes in her summary section. Either the technology employed significantly exceeds the self-reported Tier 4 ceiling in Earth's public capability disclosure, or the Tier 4 designation as applied to human engineering represents a classification error of considerable magnitude. She is being measured. What she means is, the ceiling we assumed was their ceiling was not. Arvin sits across from me in my office with his mineral compound, and he listens while I explain, in plain and careful language, that the restraint protocols did not govern only behavior. They governed output, cognitive, physiological, technological. For 200 years, every human engineer, scientist, and strategic planner worked with a portion of their available capacity voluntarily suppressed, not secretly. Voluntarily, with full documentation, with the consent of every human generation that came after the generation that signed. Ada Marsh's protocols were thorough. She did not design things by halves. How many of your people knew the full scope of this? Arvin asks. Everyone who wanted to know. It was not a secret, it was a choice. He is quiet for a long time. When he speaks again, his voice carries something I have not heard in it before, something that sounds like the beginning of a revised understanding. You chose to be less. We chose to be something that could live alongside you, I say. There is a significant difference between those 2 things. The Then Collective sends a formal technical inquiry at 900 through standard diplomatic channels, which tells me they have recategorized Earth from irrelevant xenosocial noise to something that does not yet have an established label in their administrative filing system. The inquiry asks 47 specific questions about the conversion methodology at the 3 installations, structured with the precision that is the Then Collective's defining quality. I send a response that addresses 3 of the 47 questions and notes that the remaining 44 fall outside the scope of current bilateral disclosure agreements. The Then Collective replies within 11 minutes. We would like to discuss expanding the bilateral disclosure agreements. I file it for the next scheduled session cycle. Sieve's response comes privately, as it always does, written in the same careful formal English. It says, we found it in the archive, the full account of the 3 centuries before your species developed spaceflight, the internal conflicts, the near collapses, the long recovery work that followed. We understand now what you meant when you said you wanted to be something that could live with us. We did not understand the cost of that sentence until this morning. I read it 3 times. I write back, come for coffee, the real kind. I have it shipped from home. He comes at noon. We sit across from each other in my office with the good coffee and the view of the maintenance corridor, and we talk for 3 hours. Not diplomatically. Just 2 people who have been watching each other across a council chamber for years, finally close enough to speak at a volume that does not require performance. He asks me if it was worth it, the protocols, the 200 years of running at a reduced output. I look at my cup. 847 people would be alive if we had not signed them, I say. If we had entered this accord at full output, at full capability, the Kroth expansion fleet would have read the situation very differently. The terraforming site would not have been classified as an inconvenience. The substrategic designation would never have been applied because nobody in range would have been willing to apply it. But we would have walked into this body as the most dangerous thing any of these civilizations had ever encountered. We would have arrived into a room full of species that had spent millennia building careful, fragile systems for coexisting with each other and with their own histories. We would have shattered every one of those systems simply by taking our seat, not through aggression, just through presence. I hold my cup. So we chose to be less. We chose to trust the process. And the process failed 847 times. And I have spent 18 years trying to determine whether that makes us wise or foolish, and I have not yet reached a conclusion. Steve is still for a long moment. Then he says quietly, I think perhaps it makes you human. I do not know what to do with that. I refill his coffee instead. Outside the window, the maintenance crew from last week has moved on. The hull section they repaired is clean and sealed. From the inside, you cannot tell anything was ever wrong with it. That evening, Owen Brace, Earth's Fleet Coordination Director, sends me a report in the tone he uses for all information regardless of magnitude, which is the flat and neutral tone of a man who decided long ago that the content should carry the weight without the delivery adding to it. His message reads, Velhari Border Fleet has adjusted its heading, 4 degrees off prior position along our corridor. Fleet Command reports the adjustment was initiated by individual ship commanders without central authorization. When asked, the commanders describe the decision as a clarity of assessment. No further explanation is available. Clarity of assessment. I sit with those 3 words. In the absence of any demand or hostile action from Earth, in the absence of any communication at all, a Velhari border fleet maintained in observation posture along our expansion corridor moved itself 4 degrees away. Not far, just enough. I type a reply to Owen, noted, maintain current position, nothing that could be read as response posture. He replies, understood, they are holding their new heading. Good. Cal brings dinner to my office at 2000 because I have not left it since 400. He sets the container on the corner of the desk without commentary on the multiple half-empty cups occupying its surface, which is a quality in him that I have come to value more than I have said. The forum thread is at 400,000 replies, he says. What has the tone become? It changed. He sits down. He does it naturally now, without waiting to be invited, which is exactly right. Less Earth is having a moment, more like, he scrolls his pad, more like many different species trying to remember things they knew but had categorized as unimportant. What kinds of things? History, yours, pre-accord, pre-spaceflight. Someone posted the full casualty documentation from the 21st century. An Oran academic posted the population recovery analysis from the 22nd. A thin analyst, private account, wrote a long thread about what it means that your species rebuilt itself 3 separate times before it ever left its own atmosphere, and arrived here already carrying the memory of every collapse. I eat a forkful of dinner. They are starting to understand, Cal says, what the protocols actually cost you. Yes. Does that change anything, now that they are expired? I look at him. It changes everything, I say, because now they have to decide what to do with the understanding. I finish my dinner. 29 cycles have passed. The 30th is done. The clock is at 0. The galaxy is very quiet. 6 months after the protocols expire, the Galactic Accord formally requests that Earth enter new restraint negotiations. The request arrives through official channels, properly formatted, signed by 11 species representing a significant portion of the Accord's combined territory and population. It is courteous in the way that documents are courteous when the people who wrote them spent considerable time in committee debating the precise degree of courtesy to employ. I read it in my office. Set it down. Pick it up. Set it down again. Cal watches this from the doorway with the expression he has developed for moments when he correctly assesses that speaking first would be a mistake. The Orin signed it, I say. Yes, ma'am. Steve signed this document. Yes. I look at the signature. Then I look at the window, at the maintenance corridor sitting empty and clean. Schedule the first session, I say. He schedules it. What follows is 42 days of negotiation that the Accord's institutional historians will later classify as unlike any prior proceedings in the organization's 600-year documented memory. I am aware of this assessment because Steve tells me, near the end of the second week, that the Orin archive team assigned 3 full observers to the sessions. The rooms are small, round tables, no galleries, just delegations close enough together that you can see the working expressions of the people across from you, can see when someone is recalculating something in real time. I have always preferred small rooms. The Grand Council chamber is for declarations. Small rooms are where things actually get done. The Velhari delegation arrives on the first day with a full revised draft of the Mutual Protection Framework, not a proposal for revision, a complete draft, ready for line review. Arvin sets it on the table with the careful placement of someone who has been carrying it for a while and is ready to stop. I read the opening page, the third, the section on substrategic classification. The substrategic classification section is 3 words long. Classification is abolished. I look at Arvin across the table. We conducted a significant internal review, he says. I imagine you did. The classification was always a structural flaw in the framework. The original intent was resource allocation logic. It became something else over time, through accumulated precedent and the comfort of existing categories. He pauses. We are aware it became something else. We are aware of what that cost. I do not say, you had 200 years to become aware of what it cost. I do not say, 847 people were classified as not worth the effort of protection. I do not say any of the things that are true and also useless to say in this room on this day, when the person across from me is placing something real on the table. Thank you, I say. We work through the draft. The Thin Collective arrives on day 3 with a technical exchange proposal. What they want is access to human engineering methodology, not to specifications or schematics, but to the underlying thinking, the frameworks, the approach that generated what occurred at the 3 installations. Their lead negotiator is a being named S-Sir, precise to a degree I find genuinely impressive after 18 years of working alongside high-caliber minds from a dozen species. We understand, S-Sir says, that the capability demonstrated at the installations was not an isolated achievement, but a consistent baseline that was simply not expressed under the prior protocol framework. That is correct. We would like to understand the methodology. We will discuss what falls within appropriate disclosure parameters, I say. Esser nods once. We expected this answer. We prepared a tiered proposal. He places a document on the table. We believe the second tier represents a reasonable starting point for both parties. I read the second tier. It is reasonable. We begin there. On day 7, the Pelari ambassador, who has attended every session and said almost nothing, sets down his narrow-columned ledger and says something that changes the temperature of the room. He says, "We want to apologize." The silence that follows is the particular kind that happens when something real enters a formal space without the formal language to contain it. For the sub-strategic classifications, he says, for the committee delays, for the mediation sessions that produced nothing of value, we were not unaware that the framework was failing. We were aware, and we chose the comfort of the existing structure over the discomfort of changing it, because changing it had costs that we preferred not to pay. He holds my gaze. We understand that a statement of this kind does not restore anything. I look at him for a long moment. No, I say, it does not. He does not flinch, we know. It is noted, formally noted. It goes into the record of these proceedings at your request and with Earth's acknowledgement. He nods. We continue. On day 15, I have a conversation with Steve that I was not expecting, in the small anteroom off the main negotiation hall, over the Earth coffee that Steve has, over the past 6 months, developed what I can only accurately describe as a genuine and unconcealed preference for. He tells me the Orin archive team has been conducting a formal academic study, not a diplomatic analysis or a cultural assessment brief. A study, in the rigorous sense, of Earth's pre-Accord history. He says they have found it to be the most instructive document in the archive regarding the nature of voluntary limitation as a developmental concept in advanced civilizations. I ask what he means by instructive. He says, every other spacefaring civilization currently in the Accord reached the stars before it ran out of internal conflicts to fight. The conflicts simply scaled upward, expanded to larger territory, larger resources. Your species arrived after the near collapses, after the long reconstruction periods, after what your historians call the long settlement. You arrived here already carrying the full memory of what happens when restraint is abandoned. Most of us arrived not yet knowing that lesson. Some of us learned it later, at considerable cost. Some of us are still learning it. I look at the wall of the anteroom for a moment. The protocols were not primarily about capability management, he says. Not really. They were about trust. Trust that you were building with the rest of us, yes, but more fundamentally, trust that you were building with yourselves about who you chose to be. I look at him. Yes, I say. Have you built it? Same question. Different room. Different weight behind it because now the protocols are gone and the question is no longer theoretical. I think we are still building it, I say. I think that is the most honest answer I can give you. I do not think it is ever a thing you complete and put away. I think it is a thing you choose again every time a situation arises that tests it. Every day, in every room, you look at what you are capable of, and you choose what you are going to do with that capability. He is quiet. That is more honest than I anticipated, he says. I am tired today, I say. I am always more honest when I am tired. He drinks his coffee. I drink mine. The negotiations conclude on day 42. The resulting agreement is not called the new restraint protocols, because Earth made clear in the first session of the first day that the word restraint was not going to appear in any agreement we sign going forward. It is called the Accord of Active Partnership. It is the longest and most precisely worded agreement in the Accord's institutional history. It abolishes the sub-strategic classification entirely and by name. It revises the mutual protection clauses to apply to all registered presences regardless of economic or military value. It establishes a formal joint engineering methodology exchange program with Then, Orin, and Velhari participation. It creates a mandatory review mechanism for any Accord doctrine that has not been substantively updated within 50 years. Leon calls when the signing is done. He has watched the whole process from Geneva, and he sounds the way he sounds when something he was invested in has come out better than he allowed himself to expect. "It is the treaty we should have had 200 years ago," he says. "Yes. Are you satisfied with it?" I think about the word satisfied, what it means, what it costs to mean it honestly in this context. "Ask me when I am somewhere that is not this station," I say. "Ask me after I have slept in a real bed for more than a week." He laughs. He says to take care of myself. I tell him I will. He knows I mean it approximately 40% of the time, which is my historical average, and which he has long since made his peace with. I take leave. First real leave in 4 years. Not a transit layover, not a posting rotation. Documented, approved, scheduled with the quiet efficiency of someone who has been waiting a long time for the calendar to cooperate. 30 days. I go home. Missouri in April is a specific kind of beautiful that I have carried with me through 18 years of deep space postings, the way you carry a small and very particular object in a coat pocket. The light through new leaves, the smell of the air in the hour before rain, the way the land sits flat and open and entirely unconcerned with anything occurring 9 light years away. It is beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they have no idea they are beautiful and would not care if they did. My mother's house sits at the end of a road that has had the same 2 potholes since the year I started secondary school, and which the county has been scheduling to repair for approximately my entire lifetime. I park in the drive and sit in the car for a minute, looking at the front door, looking at the porch railing that my father painted white the summer before I left for my first posting, and which is still white, slightly more weathered. Still there. Nina Voss opens the front door before I get out of the car. She has always done this. Arrives at the exact moment of arrival with a precision that no satellite system I have ever worked with has matched. She stands on the porch and looks at me the way she has looked at me every time I come back from somewhere that has left marks she cannot see from the driveway. I get out of the car. She does not say anything. She puts her arms around me on the porch steps, and that is the end of it for a moment. The end of the station and the chamber and the round table and the 42 days of sessions, and the documents and the archive folder, and the 847 names I have been reciting on every shuttle since the day I filed the notice. I stand on the steps of my mother's house in April in Missouri, and I am just a person. Just a person, standing on a porch, being held. That is enough for a moment. Just that. Inside, the house smells like something baking. A smell so layered and specific and mine that it does something to the space behind my sternum that no diplomatic language has ever produced in 18 years of trying. We eat lunch at the kitchen table. Nina talks about the garden, about the neighbor's new dog that barks at the mailbox every morning, about a film she watched recently that she thought I would appreciate. I eat and I listen, and I feel the specific relief of a conversation that asks nothing of me except presence. After lunch, she pours coffee. "How is work?" she asks. I wrap both hands around the mug, white with faded blue flowers, the same mug she has been drinking from for as long as I can remember, held the same way every morning of every year. Some objects are reliable in a way that people and institutions and treaties and protocols are not, and I have learned to notice those objects and be grateful for them. "Quiet," I say. Nina Voss looks at me over the rim of her own mug. She raised a daughter who has spent 18 years negotiating peace at 9 light years remove. She knows every shade of the word quiet as her daughter uses it. She knows the difference between nothing happened and everything happened, and is finally done now. She has always known without needing it explained. She nods. "Good," she says. The oven timer goes off. She gets up. I sit at the table and look through the kitchen window at the backyard, at the trees doing what April trees in Missouri do, which is make a very simple and entirely convincing argument for the specific value of staying in one place long enough to see the same thing happen in the same way for the 40th consecutive year. On my personal pad, still in a private folder I have not cleared, there is the screenshot of the forum comment from the day after the filing. They are terrified of what they are. I have not opened the folder in 2 months. I will delete it eventually. Today or tomorrow or the day after. There is Steve's first message. What happened? I will not delete that one. Not today, not any day I can currently imagine. There is the classified folder, what we agreed to forget, which I have not accessed since the night before the expiration. I do not need to open it today. I know what it holds. I have always known what it holds. The archive contains everything that preceded 2187, the complete record of what we were before Ada Marsh wrote her protocols in small, neat handwriting on a January morning in Oslo, and before we signed the leash we built with our own hands. What we agreed to forget is not actually forgotten. It never was. It is simply stored somewhere that requires intention to reach. That is not the same thing as forgetting. That is the opposite of forgetting. You do not design a 3-step authentication process for things you want to stop thinking about. You design it for things you need to remember deliberately, carefully, with the full weight of the decision each time. We know what we are. We have always known. We sat down 200 years ago and then again 6 months ago and in every small room and round table in between, and we looked at the full account of ourselves honestly, and we chose what we were going to do with it. Not once, not as a founding decision that settled the question forever. Every day, every session, every filing, every notice. We chose it again. That is what restraint is from the inside. Not a cage, not a ceiling, not a thing imposed from outside that keeps something dangerous safely contained. It is a decision that a person or a species makes with full knowledge of every alternative, in a room where every alternative is genuinely available and chooses anyway. It is the hardest kind of choice because it is never finished. You choose it in the Grand Council chamber with 214 delegations watching. You choose it in the small anteroom with a cup of coffee and one person who is watching you carefully and asking if you have proved it yet. You choose it in the silence after the clock runs to 0 and the galaxy goes quiet, and you are asleep in your quarters because the warning was the proof, and the choice was always the point. My mother comes back to the table with 2 plates. She sits down across from me. We eat. Outside the window, the trees are doing their April work. The potholes are still in the road. The porch railing is still white. The cloud from the council chamber ceiling is not here and does not need to be. Somewhere 9 light-years away, the galaxy is becoming, slowly and imperfectly and with considerable diplomatic paperwork, something slightly better than it was. The clock